Good people, today we are going to talk about what makes great art, and we are going to do it with the participation of one of America's greatest cultural figures, so stick around. In 1983, PBS put out an 11-part TV series called Bernstein, Beethoven, in which the Vienna Philharmonic performed all 9 of Beethoven's symphonies, conducted by Bernstein, and then in between, the Swiss actor, director, and semi-professional pianist Maximilian Schell interviewed Bernstein about the music. Bernstein, America's most famous conductor at the time, and perhaps of all time, had also written the scores for West Side Story and On the Waterfront, and was a brilliant musical educator, by which I mean he could illuminate, even in those of us who don't really understand music as a language, how music works. I am going to reflect on the perhaps 2.5 most shared minutes from that 11-part series. In my opinion, they are tremendously revealing about art in general. Although Bernstein speaks about Beethoven and music, I am going to relate it to my great love of literature, my great love of the art of narrative. Now, temporarily, I'm going to give the floor to the master, Leonard Bernstein.
There is no aspect of Beethoven in which you can say Beethoven is great as a melodist, a harmonist, a contrapuntist, a tone painter, his orchestration. You can find fault with all of them. If you take any one of these elements separately, you find nobody. There's nothing there.
Okay. Before he expounds on why Beethoven wasn't particularly gifted in any of these qualities, let's lay out the equivalent qualities in literature. Melody. Perhaps that's story, conflict, plot, what hooks us. Harmony. Let's call that flow or surface charm. The smoothness and pleasant nature of the prose that carries us along. Counterpoint. I'm going to call that dialogue. Different voices bouncing off each other. Tone painting. Descriptive style. How many different settings and characters' heads can the writer immerse us in? And how well? How convincingly? And finally, orchestration. Narrative structure. Are all the different pieces of the narrative in the right place? Do they come in at the right time? Are they neatly braided? Do they culminate and create crescendos? Or do they bog down and get in each other's way? Now, let's listen to Bernstein disparage all of these qualities in Beethoven, starting with counterpoint, mentioning how Beethoven always struggled with the fugue, which depends on different melodies and different lines of music playing off each other.
He spent his whole life trying to write a good fugue. And he himself admitted he never succeeded. And as far as his orchestration is concerned, you could have it. I mean, it's bad. It has trumpets sticking out all playing the same note, and it's sort of drowning out everybody else. You can't really hear. You have to balance. The melodies go like that, and you can't really say it's a great melodist. And the harmonies, any child could write. And as for harmonies, how many times do you have to listen to the pages of one chord over it? That's not very interesting harmonically, right?
Well, what makes it interesting?
Well,
before we get to what makes Beethoven interesting, let's talk about how not all great books have all of these literary qualities in spades, although we're going to start with one that does, Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. It's got an intricate and intriguing plot. The main strain being a gorgeous and good-hearted socialite who cheats on her staid and much older husband with a cavalry officer, falls in love, and destroys her reputation and life. The prose is straightforward. It doesn't call attention to itself. It just moves you right along. Tolstoy set out to write a page-turner, a very intelligent and complex one, but it's not a dense modernist tract. The dialogue. Even translated from Russian, it reveals a dozen or more different voices of well-rounded characters in conflict or in love. Descriptive style. It's able to depict convincingly the psychology of men, women, soldiers, aristocrats, drunks, housekeepers, the ambiance of the drawing room, the ambiance of the bedroom, the ambiance of a horse race. And finally, narrative structure. We're talking about almost 1,000 pages, 350,000 words tied up neatly with no loose ends, but also tied up emphatically with great wisdom and emotional depth. So, Tolstoy, at his best, had it all. And he also had heart and soul, because you can possess virtuosity in all of these qualities, but lack art. You can impress people with talent and skill without moving them. You can write brilliantly with the sole objective of putting your gifts on display, but whether you have them or not, that's not going to create a deep bond with the reader. Okay, now let's take a couple of novels that lack more of these literary qualities than they possess, but are still great works. For example, On the Road by Jack Kerouac. Conflict and plot, it's a road novel. The narrator just moves from one place to another, or back and forth between coasts. There's nothing sophisticated about that. The dialogue in On the Road, it doesn't stand out. It just merges with the prose. In narrative structure, the book just sort of starts and then stops. In a way, Truman Capote was right when he said it wasn't writing but typing. But because of its delicious and intense flow, and because it paints one note so well, antsy, fast-paced, joyful rebellion against convention, it's immortal. And more or less the same can be said about The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. He's another one-note Johnny, in a way. Holden Caulfield's voice, adolescent cynicism with a soft spot in his heart for his 10-year-old sister Phoebe, is so spectacularly and seamlessly rendered that the reader doesn't notice or mind that the book might be unsophisticated in other ways. Dialogue. That is Salinger's great strength. Or monologue, in the case of The Catcher in the Rye. He can drive a whole novel with it. Dialogue and flow, that's what makes The Catcher in the Rye, or monologue and flow, that's what makes The Catcher in the Rye great, aside from its heart and its soul. Its plot, an adolescent who runs away from prep school and has a nervous breakdown, or its narrative structure, his ruminations and reflections on his disappointments as he flees school and wanders around Manhattan in the winter. There's nothing extraordinary about that. But Salinger didn't have to make it extraordinary for the book to have massive impact. Now, let's listen to Bernstein explain what made Beethoven great.
Well, what makes it interesting?
Well, it's the form. Well, form is a mold that can be made to be very uninteresting factor. But in Beethoven's case, the form is all, because it is a case of what note succeeds every other note.
So this is key, right? Bernstein is defining form in this case as what note succeeds every other note, which could easily be extrapolated in the context of writing to what word succeeds every other word. Back to Bernstein.
And in Beethoven's case, it is always the right next note, as though he had some private telephone wire to heaven, which told him what the next note had to be. No composer ever had that, even Mozart, to that degree, where everything is so unpredictable and yet so right. It all checks. It all works out. You can rely on it. You know the next note has to be the next note and the only next note that could come. And that makes his form perfect. How he had this, nobody knows, because he struggled, he scratched out, he He never left his rooms. He went crazy, and he kept saying, well, I'm writing only the tip of the iceberg of what I really feel, what I could really write. His room was a mess. His food was uneaten. For 3 days, it was stale. The chamber pot was unemptied under his piano. He moved all the time. He couldn't find a place that was right. He kept trying. If you look at those sketches, you see the crossings out. You see the agonies that this man went through. And what has finally appeared as the finished product looks as though it was simply phoned in from God. That's what's so incredible. But he wrecked himself in his whole life trying to do this, trying to achieve this very inevitability. That's the word for it. It's every note that comes is inevitable. Could have been no other note.
So this is where Bernstein really gets me thinking. Phoned in from God. Every note unpredictable yet perfect, inevitable, and the almost self-destructive struggle to achieve that inevitability. The so-called suffering of the artist. An annoying trope maybe, but perhaps also an indisputable truth. I mean, clearly, the pursuit of what Flaubert called le mot juste, the perfect word, can drive you crazy if you take it too far. But what is too far? Did Beethoven take it too far? Is that sin vivir, as the Spanish like to say, that inability to live the moment in the world, is that sin vivir the necessary sacrifice to make great art? Does the heart and soul of great artistic work depend on how hard we work to get it right? Or is that heart and soul our effortless self-abandonment on the page? Or is it a little bit of both? I wonder if that effortlessness is a kind of victory walk or survivor's aura after the battle has more or less been won, the battle, not the war, won by a small margin with lots of casualties, because musical notes and words are never sufficient to express what we really feel. They never get it exactly right. But perhaps if we get it close enough, it reads or sounds like glory, or it reads or sounds like the compensation that comes from the true and relentless pursuit of that glory. Look, even if Kerouac's On the Road reads like typing, it's inspired typing. He wrote clunky versions of that book many times before it all came out of him in that final, perhaps amphetamine-induced rush. I suspect that he had struggled with that book for so long that he was able to put aside the uninspired attempts, start from scratch, and just let rip. Take down, transcribe what in a way was phoned in from God. Thanks for watching, good people. A quick reminder, to support the cause, you can always like, comment, or follow, or if my passion and insights about literature make you curious about my own attempts at it, there is always My Half Orange, a story of love and language in Seville, published by Tortoise Books in 2023, about the 10 most transformative years of my life when I moved from New York City to Seville, Spain in 2005, met a local woman, and started a family with her without hardly speaking Spanish. I plan to soon upload an audio version to Substack, Rants from a Foreign Land, John Julius Reel. Follow me there to receive all my updates by email. Thanks, good people.